Good evening and welcome to the Moving Home with Charlie weekly workshop with Charlie Lambden and guests. Live at 8 p.m. every Wednesday. This show is here to help all home movers of the UK be better prepared for dealing with the gauntlet that is trying to move home.
Helping make sure everyone has a home.
Whether you're buying, selling or both, it's a live show. So if you have a question about your move, pop it in the live chat. In the meantime, sit back, have a noisy slurp of your drink and enjoy the show.
Sorry, I can't resist it. Sounds almost exactly the same as the one in the intro. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another Wednesday weekly workshop on Moving Home with Charlie. I'm Charlie Lambden. This is the last ever live stream from this location. So some people might be sad about that, some people might not, but this is the last time we'll be live streaming from this location for reasons I'll explain to you another time. And in tonight's live stream, I've got special guest Simon David, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Thomas Legal Group. He is a solicitor, conveyancing solicitor, and runs one of the best award-winning law firms in the property sector, and has been helping followers of this channel with their moves now for 3 years, which has been fantastic. So we've got a lot of new followers on the channel, and these live Q&As are literally exactly that. In the live chat, if you're watching and you've got a question about the conveyancing process, your move, if you're buying, if you're selling, the timing, anything at all, any challenges you've had, what to do if you've got a problem conveyancer, anything at all, tonight is the night you can put your questions directly live to Simon. Now, from my point of view, just before we get into this, and those of you who've watched my 10 golden rules of selling will know this, I say to sellers, choose your conveyancer before you choose your agent. And honestly, in 25 years of working in this business, I don't think I've ever encountered any other single step that will speed up the sale of a home more than having your home sale ready. So the legals are done. So when a buyer turns up, if it's a cash buyer and they're legally ready, you can exchange in days, in theory. Okay. And if you're serious about selling, you are going to have a conveyancer anyway. So why delay it? Get your conveyancer first, because then when you go and choose your agent and you say to all the agents you're talking to, I've already got my conveyancer lined up and I'm going to be fully sale ready, the agents will fall over themselves to sell your house, and you are going to get a lower fee, probably more than offset the cost of your conveyancing. Without further ado, I'm going to bring Simon in. Good evening, Simon.
Hey, Charlie, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And how are you? Well, it's been a long time.
Yeah, very, very good. Yeah, had 2 weeks off, which is nice to get away from the office. So yeah, back to it. Back to driving the business forward.
Absolutely, you and me both. And I forgot. I've just seen in the monitor. I'm sporting some new merch.
That's beautiful.
That is actually my actual handwriting as well. That was a scribble I wrote down as an idea, and
wow.
Actually, we used the scan of that scribble, and that's not the merch. So,
are you selling these?
We are, and shop.mhwc.co.uk.
Do I get a free one?
Yeah, of course you do. And they have much nicer. This is not supposed to be. This is actually the official name of this color is Irish green. But it's not one of the colors it's supposed to be. There's a range of colors. There's this and baseball cap.
Oh, nice work.
So
what does that say?
It says the same thing.
Ah. Okay.
Fix housing, fix everything. Because when I get the chance to actually talk through that, it's pretty much true. There are very few national problems in society that don't get improved if you fix the housing market. And this is actually straight on to the next topic, because while we wait for any questions, I'm going to just...
I thought you might play the drums as your last night in your house. Is that going to happen?
Well, I did actually contemplate that, but it's the evening and there are neighbours with kids asleep and that kind of stuff. I would like to do that, but I am one of the something going on with this live stream. I'm not sure it's actually coming up on X, which is one of our most popular channels where we're live streaming. Hang on a second.
I'm just going to apologise to everyone as well because my computer seems to be, I don't know, updating something. But so the beeps in the background is probably not your laptops, it's mine.
Yes.
Or your tablets is mine. So apologies.
Simon is a fantastic legal genius when it comes to moving house. Just don't ask him to turn the noise in his computers off. Anyway, listen. Something I've been meaning to ask you for a long time, and something that I see a lot of conversation about on X, is debate about leasehold versus commonhold. I've got a couple of questions I wanted to ask you about that from your point of view. You understand? I'd love to ask you to first just explain, not without going into too much detail, but just explain as simply as you can to understand the difference between leasehold and commonhold. And then secondly, whether or not you think anything's actually going to get done in this government, and if so, what, and what that will mean for owners of leaseholds.
Yeah, that's a big topic, isn't it? Okay, so very simply, leasehold is where you own your unit. You own the inside of your unit, like a flat, for example, but you don't own the ground that it's within. So that is the freehold. So the building, the foundations, the sky above it, the garden, that will be generally owned by a landlord or a freeholder or a management company, just to complicate matters. So the problem with a lease, so you get granted a lease by your landlord, by your freeholder, is that will decrease over time. And sometimes when leases are granted, they started at 999 years. Sometimes they started at 99 years, sometimes 125 years. And the really crazy thing about it is as your lease term decreases, you get to a stage where also the value of your property will decrease. And in general terms, the year to remember is 80 years left on your lease. And I can go into why that is, if you like, a little bit later. So that is generally how it is. And that's what the government have been concerned for all these poor people that have these leases. They decrease in time, and therefore the value of their properties decrease, which is unfair. It's completely unfair. Why should it? Why should your value of your property decrease just because you've got a leasehold property? So they are consulting on. They did actually pass some legislation in relation to commonhold, but nothing ever happened with it. So the government are currently consulting on commonhold. What happens with commonhold is that you will own your flat as a freehold unit, and then there will be, in effect, an agreement in the background which all of you will abide by, if you like a lease, really. So that'll be rules and regulations. So it'll, things like how much maintenance charge you might pay, who's responsible for what areas, what you can do with your unit, what you can't do with your unit, which, restrictions and rights and what. Do you have a right over the car park and all that sort of thing? So that's where the government are at the moment. Commonhold is not yet in. If it does come in, the government say they're keen to do it, but it's a consultation at the moment. Will it be in this government? Maybe. I mean, they are pushing, and we've got the Renters Reform Act. That's obviously a new piece of legislation. They have gone part way with leasehold, in that they have made it easier for people to extend their leases when they've got shorter leases. The main sticking point with extending your lease term is that when a lease gets, which I'm talking about 80 years, when a lease gets below 80 years, your landlord, your freeholder, can charge you for extending it. And in effect, what happens is that they share in the upside. So if you've got a very short lease, and because it's short, it can only be sold to a cash buyer because you can't get a mortgage on it, it might be worth, let's say, £100,000. If you then extend the lease, it might be worth £300,000. Now, the landlord, if it's below 80 years, can share in that upside. So they can take, in effect, 50% of the upside. So the government wanted to abolish this thing. It's called marriage value. The government wanted to abolish that. And the trouble is that lots of very big landlords, like the Duke of Westminster and others, have said, oh, hold on a minute. We've got all these lovely short leases, particularly in London. How are we going to make any money when people want to extend their leases? So that's gone back to the drawing board. Obviously, they don't want to upset people like the Duke of Westminster and other institutional landlords. So Is that going to happen? I don't know. But there is some leasehold legislation coming already. So it's easier now to, if you've got a dodgy landlord who doesn't do what he's supposed to be doing, it's easier to form your own company as the residents, to take over the responsibility, for example. So we are making some progress with leasehold, but commonhold would solve it all. But you can imagine you've got to bring in the legislation. Lawyers have got to get used to it, a whole new drafting of documents that we've never ever done before. So someone's got to take that lead. And then you've got mortgage lenders who will all have their own opinion on what's going to be acceptable, what's not going to be acceptable, what they expect to see in the agreement, etc., etc. So I think we've still got a lot of hoops to jump through.
So from what you just described, the main difference between leasehold and commonhold is that commonhold doesn't count down like a ticking clock.
Correct. Because it's a freehold unit. That's exactly right. Yeah.
But do you have any, I mean, the biggest complaint from the most leaseholders I hear is about service charges, rampant increases in service charges.
Yeah.
Do commonholders is it any different for commonholders?
Well, there will be rights in there for, well, you will decide collectively how you pay those services, how much you pay. So you won't have, in effect, an outside person, a third party, deciding how much is going to be charged. Okay. You can still apply
arbitrary massive price increases forced on you, like you
yeah, exactly, which you can challenge, of course, as a tenant now. So the whole thing is it's a collective unit, it's a collection of units, and you all abide by the I think it's called a commonhold statement. We don't know what's going to look like. And in there will be things like service charge, etc. So there'll be much more control between the residents, because it won't be a third party, as I said, owning anything, owning any interest.
I remember having a conversation 20 years ago with a surveyor, Douglas and Gordon in London, having beers in the pub one evening in London, and I remember him saying he described the leasehold system as a Gordian knot that can't be tied.
Yeah,
and he was a specialist. He was a leasehold specialist.
Yeah,
and I remember him just, he had a few beers as well. He said, "I'll never change it. It's impossible. Even if everyone agrees that you want to change it, the actual technical process of changing it is just
it will." Yeah, it will be enormous. And remember, this is only going to apply to new leases, new properties. So it's not going to suddenly get rid of all the existing leases. Okay. So you're going to have years and years of leasehold still. But hopefully your rights as a leaseholder will be better as the years go on, if the government get their way and abolish things, like I said, like things like marriage value, etc.
And do you think it'll have any impact on the value of existing leasehold flats if they do make some changes to the law? Do you think there'll be
absolutely? Yeah? It'll become, if you abolish marriage value, it won't be so expensive to extend your lease.
Right.
Because that is the problem with a lot of leasehold properties. People would like to extend the leases, just can't afford to do it because of this marriage value. And you've got to pay all the landlord's fees and surveyors, and you've got to go through a process. And if you can't agree with the landlord how much it's going to cost, then you've got to go to a tribunal. I mean, that's expensive. So if you abolish marriage value, for example, there'll be a set amount for you to extend your lease. Happy days. The landlord's saying, well, hold on a minute. Why should you have all that benefit? If you buy a property with a 30-year lease, you're buying it cheap. Why shouldn't we have some of the upside to allow you to sell it at a much higher value once the lease is extended? So those sort of discussions are going on. Abolishing marriage value will be a massive, massive change, and will make it a lot easier. Because you can imagine some clever people will, and I think this is happening to a certain extent already. There are leases in London, for example, which may only be 20 or 30 years. So people are buying those in the hope that the legislation changes. They don't have to pay any marriage value. They can extend at a very low sum of money, and suddenly they have a very, very valuable asset, which they can then sell or mortgage or do whatever they want with.
I can see why experienced punters might be taking a few of those punts.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah.
Sorry, a few people who've joined, and there's just people saying, "What's that pinging noise?" So Simon's computer, it's been taken over by AI, and it just decides to ping when it likes.
I'm gonna power lead out, see if that makes a difference. There we go. I don't know.
There's someone called Drabsy89 is saying that a long leasehold is not as bad as the media make out. You still pay service charges under a freehold or common hold. There are common parts and structures.
Yes.
So do you agree with that?
Absolutely. And if you have a 999-year lease, And you also, so you've got a very, very long lease, and also collectively, let's say there's 4 flats, but the 4 of you actually own the freehold to the building as well. Well, commonhold isn't really going to help you very much. The value of your property is not going to decrease, and you can already control the expenditure on that block of flats as well.
Right, we've got the first question here. I'm just going to throw it at you. Dan Juris on YouTube says, selling a leasehold flat, inquiries pending where I've disclosed previous neighbour noise, but no official complaints. Buyer solicitor now asking for confirmation it's resolved, but I have no proof. Interesting situation. Do you come across that a lot?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because if it's not a dispute, I'm not sure whether you'd actually even have to disclose it, because what you might think is noisy, someone else might not think is noisy. For example, I think we've talked about this before, if you have dogs and they bark a lot, your neighbour doesn't like dogs, they would think that's noisy. However, if they have dogs, they may not even think about it at all. Yeah. How do you resolve it? I suppose the only thing you do is get a letter from the neighbour to say, well, I'm sorry, I was banging and I was actually, doing some carpentry and I've stopped now and it won't ever happen again. That's probably the only thing you're going to do. But is your neighbour gonna do that? I don't know.
No clever legal process for this. It's just
not really. And ultimately, it's up to the buyer to take a view on it, isn't it? But he's done the right thing. Well, has he done the right thing? I don't know whether you actually needed to disclose noise in the first place. Certainly disputes you do. And I think we talked about this before is, you have to give answers which affect the property. Now, does noise affect the property? Well, that's arguable. Depends on the noise. Does it happen all the time? Have you made a formal complaint to the neighbour? But obviously, this person hasn't made a formal complaint, so I'm not sure whether they would need to disclose it, because it was a previous neighbour noise, so I wouldn't probably even disclose that. There was no need to.
Okay. Baldrick's Turnip on YouTube says, if you wanted to have 4 months between exchange and completion, would this be reasonable, or would you offer a rent or discount?
Yeah, very reasonable. What you see a lot is, so remember that exchange of contracts is when you're legally bound to buy the property or sell, and then the completion date, and that's when the buyer pays 10% deposit. And then you set the completion date when you exchange contracts. So the completion date is when you pay the balance of the funds. You can have a year between exchange and completion. The problem being, if you have a long period and you've got a mortgage offer, you've got to be really careful. And I've seen this happen with a difficult market. We've got quite a difficult market at the moment. So you have a mortgage offer to buy this property, you exchange contracts, and you set a completion date for, let's say, 6 months ahead. Then you forget that your mortgage offer is only valid for 3 months. So 3 months, you've exchanged contracts, you've committed to buying the property, and then a few months later you go, oh my God, I've got to get another mortgage offer. And the lender says, well, I just want to check your situation. And actually what's happened is that you've changed your job, or your salary's decreased or something like that. And then the lender turns around and says, well, I'm sorry, we're not going to give you a mortgage. You've then committed to a purchase without a mortgage. So you can do a long stop, you can do a long period between exchange and completion, but make sure that your mortgage offer or your whatever finance you're getting is valid at the time of that you are going to complete this deal.
Very, very wise words. Liam says, can you use part of the money from a leaser towards conveyancing fees?
No, you can't use that. So leaser is a lifetime ISA, and this was something the government put in some time ago as an incentive for people to save, and they would give you extra money if you put it in an ISA. My understanding is you cannot use it for fees. You have to use it as part of the purchase price, as a deposit.
Okay. Aaron Lambert's question comes in 2 parts. I'm currently buying a leasehold flat. The seller has extended the lease, but for whatever reason, the surveyor has valued the property with the previous amount of years left on the lease. What are the chances of this value being overturned? We have a copy of the lease extension and it's now with the lender.
I think it will depend on what's the difference in years. Was it sort of a very short lease, or is it now so it will depend. If it was 90 years, which they put down, and in fact there's 120 years to run, it's probably not going to make any difference to the value. But we talk about this 80 years thing again. If they're saying it's 60 and now it's actually 90 or 100, then that could make a fundamental difference. I think all you can do is get your solicitor or your mortgage advisor to put it back to the lender, and then the lender will then go to their surveyor, and then the surveyor will make a decision. But generally, if it's over 80 years, I don't think it's going to make a lot of difference to the value. Remember, though, if it has downvalued it, that's an opportunity for you to potentially renegotiate the price.
Absolutely. Marching.
Well, I think he's talked about it's gone from 77 to 166. So it's below that 80 years. So okay. Yes, that may well make a difference to the value.
Sorry, on to the next question. Marcin Związkowski says, who signs the contract in the name of an offshore company selling leasehold property? And in case of a breaching the contract by the seller, what are my chances to get my money back? It's a good question.
Good question. I mean, believe it or not, the contract could be signed by anyone with authority of that company. So in an offshore company, they'll still have directors of that company. It might be a trust manager. It could be, it could be even the solicitor. So quite often when we have clients abroad, we'll just get their consent to sign the contract on their behalf. We send them a copy of the contract. We explain it to them, and they'll give us consent to sign. So it doesn't have to be signed by the actual seller. Someone that's authorized by the seller to sign the contract. Excuse me. That's the first thing. I think the second part is probably more interesting. Yes, if they breach the contract in any way, they say they've exchanged contracts, you're all legally bound, and then they turn around and go, we're not going to buy it, or we're not going to sell it, depending on who they are. Very difficult to enforce against an offshore company because they're in a different jurisdiction. They're probably in the British Virgin Islands or Jersey or Guernsey, or that's where most of them are. So yeah, difficult. What I would say is that if they are a seller, it's owned by an offshore trust, I think it's highly unlikely that they would breach the contract. Unless there's someone that's living there, a tenant, and the tenant hasn't gone, that could be a breach. But in general terms, I don't think you've got too much of a problem.
Jack May says, any guidelines on smoothing the current process of leasehold sale where the freeholder is a housing association, please?
Well, this comes back to your earlier point, Charlie, is getting as much as you can up front from the housing association. As part of the leasehold process, there is a form which is filled in by the landlords or the freeholder or the managing agents called an LPE1, and that contains lots of really useful information like how much is paid in service charge, how much is paid in ground rent, are there going to be any works done, have there been any disputes, yada yada. Lots and lots of questions, really useful stuff. So if you can get that LPE1 signed early, then that'll stand you in good stead. The problem is properties are taking quite some time to sell, and your buyer solicitor may turn around and go, well, this was filled out 6 months ago. We're not happy. It's not up to date. We need you to do another one. And then you've got to pay for another one, potentially. So it's a little bit difficult. I share your pain with the housing association. Sadly, I don't want to knock housing associations, but often they're slow, or their managing agents are very slow at providing information, and that can hold up deals.
Next question is from someone watching on X, Henry, who says, what are we going to do about the quality of information provided by managing agents in leasehold sale transactions? The paperwork provided is always missing crucial documents. Replies to inquiries are not clear. It causes weeks of toing and froing, trying to get crucial details and clarity. That sounds like that's questions coming from a place of real pain.
And it's an absolutely valid point. Let's be honest, there are really good managing agents and there are bad ones, and I'm not going to name them. But there are times when 60% of what we do is leasehold. So we have that pain every day, and there are some that are very expensive, although the government has controlled some of their costs to a certain extent. And getting hold of anyone, he or she is absolutely right. It's really painful. They give you this LPA1 form that I'm talking about. Yeah, sometimes they've got bits missing from it. They haven't answered it properly. So you've got to go back to them. And that takes time. And then they don't answer that, or they want extra money for answering that. So yeah, I do share your pain. What are we going to do about the quality of it? We really need to legislate, I think, or try and report this report. I suppose you report to your MP or something if it's really causing problems, because your MP is the one that could try and legislate or help legislate for these sorts of problems that we have in the system. The system is rubbish. Let's be honest.
Well, that brings me on to a question that I wanted to ask you. Actually, it's as a the boss of a firm of conveyancers that is striving constantly to bring transaction times down, to get deals over the line faster, to make sure you avoid delays. What can you do when your counterparty, the conveyancer on the other side of the transaction, just isn't responding, or is responding insufficiently, inadequate responses? What can you do? I mean, because there are people in a chain where you've got 2 or 3 or 4 transactions, and you have even one really poor conveyancer in that chain.
Yeah.
It can scupper the whole chain, can't it?
Yeah. I mean, that's, that is the ultimate question, isn't it? That you're as good as the weakest link. And the sad thing is, conveyancers for a long time now have been busier than ever. The market's been very steady. Lots of conveyancers left the industry after the last stamp duty holiday. So the better conveyancers are becoming busier and busier and having to deal with all this extra volume because there's nowhere else it can go. And then you get the problem of a solicitor that goes on holiday, leaves it to an assistant who actually doesn't know what they're doing. So the file sits there for 2 weeks. I think in that scenario, all you can do is you can speak to the estate agent. You can speak to your client to see if they have any relationship with the opposite party, because quite often buyers and sellers will talk between themselves. You can, I think, if it goes on and on and on, I think what I would do is I would find out who is running that firm, and I would write a complaint to them. If they were acting for me, I would complain to the managing director and say this is unacceptable, and hopefully that will then resolve the matter. But it's a perennial problem of conveyancing, and that's why I said the system's rubbish. It takes too long, and we're currently running, not my firm, but as an industry, I think we're running, depending on where you look, 150, 160 days from the time you accept an offer to the time you actually get to complete a matter. I mean, that's a nonsense.
It is, yeah. We were having a brief chat before we went on air about Carrington's and how fast they had one sale recently that went from public launch for sale to exchanged in 62 days, just under 9 weeks, just under 9 weeks to exchange from launch. So yeah, it can, like you said to me all along, there's nothing stopping transactions from happening much faster. It's just all of these human delays, isn't it? Because there are so many people involved, and there's always someone who's on holiday or whose dog's not well or something.
You can do. We've done transactions in 2 days. You can do them in 2 days, but you've got to have everything set up in advance to do that. But yes, you can do them very quickly.
This is the thing that everyone gets wrong about what they talk about AI. AI is not going to solve the problem of somebody in the chain being on holiday, is it?
No, it's not. But hopefully, it might help in getting some of the standard documentation, getting through the system quicker. So if you've got a solicitor that's got sort of 5 files to open, for example, and that's holding them up to do any other work, AI may then be able to generate initial letters very quickly and get that information out, or those requests out to a client. So the trouble is, it all takes investment, Charlie, and for years and years and years, conveyancing firms have not invested in any tech. And that's why, sadly, you still get these problems.
I think not only are they not invested in any tech, very few firms have invested in implementing human processes to improve the problem, like you've done so well. Yeah. It's not, because I've always said that the best outcomes are when you've got exactly the right balance of team and tech.
Yeah.
It's always got to be both. You can't do all tech or all team. You've got to have both, and you've got to have the right balance. And then when you hit the sweet spot, it really sinks.
Yeah, I mean, I know of a firm, that uses the tech where they have almost automated reports to clients, but they don't employ many lawyers. But that's terrible, because the client actually isn't getting any advice. They're just getting if your property is this, then consider this. It's not actually giving any specific advice about what you're buying, because they haven't got the technical expertise to do that. And that's, my firm, for example, has lots of really good technical lawyers. You're absolutely right. You've got tech and you've got technical lawyers and tech.
Yeah, it's the balance. Right, got lots of questions still coming in. Taliesin Walker says, how risky is it to buy a leasehold house?
You can't buy a leasehold house if it's a new build anymore, because there are lots of problems with that. Is it risky? Well, not necessarily. You still got the right to buy the freehold, and I would really look at doing that. because that's relatively straightforward for you to do, and may well add value. So it can be a long lease, not a problem. My house I'm sitting at the moment is on a long lease. It's not necessarily an issue. It comes back to my earlier point. So in my development, we all own the freehold between us, but we all have lease because we've got a mixture of flats and houses. So your mixed development like that, it can work perfectly well. So no risk. Again, look at the term, look at the management. What are you responsible for? What are you not responsible for? And make sure you're properly advised by a lawyer.
Questions coming thick and fast now. WF451 says, can a buyer pull out after exchange and before completion, and you will get your deposit back from your conveyancer minus any conveyancer fees which are agreed in advance? In other words, can you get your deposit back after you've exchanged?
No, you can't. And if you default, so you exchange contracts, you pay the 10% over to the sellers, it comes to the completion date and you go, oh, I don't want to buy it now, I want my money back. I'm sorry, that's not going to happen. The seller will serve you a notice and they'll say, you've got 10 days to pay us the cash, or we're going to keep the cash. They'll charge you interest in the meantime. And then they'll also sue you. So let's say the seller is then buying another property and that person's buying on, you're going to face a massive claim. So you'll lose your deposit, plus they may well sue you for all the other costs as well. Make sure when you exchange contracts, you definitely want to buy the property.
It reminds me of a story of some agents I knew in Notting Hill back in the 90s who used to flip properties between exchange and completion. And it was a Foxtons employee doing this on the side. I mean, it was so, I mean, everyone was happy. No one lost out. But because he was having to exchange on a property and then find a new buyer before completion.
Wow.
He made a killing. I mean, the timing was just right, but he couldn't stand, like, if he'd lost, because these were also some big houses, right? So some chunky amounts of money he's talking about that he didn't have. So he had a partner who stood guaranteed in case he had to cough up and pay for it, because every now and then it would happen. Occasionally, they'd exchange and be unable to complete and lose the deposit. And in return for taking that risk, his investor got half of their profits.
And you wonder why estate agents have a bad press, don't you? I mean, I don't think that. Well, I'm sure it does happen very occasionally these days, but
I haven't known what was happening ever since then. But
no.
I remember he went from fairly skint to having a yacht and an Aston Martin within a couple of years. He then went on to be someone quite senior at Dexter's. Anyway,
move on.
Yes, move on. Oh, dearie me, stories we could tell. Paris H, just reaffirming something you said. I bought a leasehold and ended up emailing the council and copying my solicitor in on staff as my seller solicitor was incompetent.
Yeah. Well, that's it. You know, and what I find funny is that and this is another thing, another bit of advice for all of you out there, is that if you're going to employ a solicitor, ask them how much leasehold work they do, because there are solicitors that say they're conveyancing specialists, and then you ask them if they do lease and they don't want to do leasehold, and then suddenly they want to charge you a huge amount because actually they don't want to take the work in the first place. So I know quite a few of those lawyers, sadly. We are conveyancing specialists, that's all we do, but they don't want to do leasehold. So, you know, you're not conveyancers if you can't do leasehold.
Here's an interesting question. Kevin H says, 2 local solicitors have declined to process my ID and access to funds as a cash buyer until after I have an offer accepted by a seller. Why?
Well, because they don't want to do it, because it's extra work for them. I mean, I'm surprised at that, but then that just shows you how short-sighted lots of lawyers are, as well as clients, sadly. But, you know, we always encourage it, get it all sorted. There's obviously going to be a cost to do it, but I don't know why lawyers are like that. Obviously, they don't want the work. They're obviously too busy. It's
amazing. There are mortgage brokers who are the same. There are mortgage brokers who you ring them up and say, hey, I want to get my mortgage in principle in place and be ready to offer. And they go, oh, no, just call me back when you've had an offer accepted. And those lawyers and mortgage brokers fail to understand the value that they can add to their clients by helping them be ready and improve their chance of getting the offer accepted. So, yeah. Kevin, why? The answer to your question is because those lawyers don't understand the value they're adding to their clients, and I wouldn't use them. I'd go and find one who's welcome. I mean, there is a follow-on question for that, which is there is a sweet spot, isn't there? Because you can have buyers who come on board way too soon. Like they're months and months and months away from having an offer accepted.
Yeah.
And then, because I noticed a lot of the followers on this channel who end up putting their details in to come and talk to you guys, and the guys at Sweeney Miller up in Sunderland are saying, I've just had an offer accepted. I want to get my legal sorted out as quick as I can. And so that makes you think that sometimes people are caught out. But I mean, what I try and say is that the best time is perhaps not before your very first ever viewing, unless you're really confident. I have had a follower on the channel who said, watched my channel for a while, took all the advice, viewed one property, offered, got it. But that's pretty unusual. I think it's, you probably know, don't you, when you're starting to get confident that actually you're getting close to have an offer accepted.
Yeah.
That's the time when you.
Yeah, I mean, the trouble is if you do it like 12 months ahead, we get it all sorted, and then the trouble is we've got to revisit it because all your bank statements and your source of wealth might be completely out of date. So yeah, do it when you're really confident you're going to go and buy something in the next 8 weeks or so, I would think.
So within the next couple of months, if you expect to have an offer accepted in a couple of months, because the real
viewing.
Sorry.
And you're actively out viewing.
Yeah, exactly. You're actively out viewing. Because I think the real value is that if a buyer can submit an offer and attach with it an email from their conveyancer showing that the source of funds has already been approved, that's really powerful. I mean, it's nice for an agent to see that as well, because it's like one less thing that's going to make the deal for you, isn't it?
Yes.
So it is really well doing that. And not enough buyers listen to this point, right? If you are in a highly competitive environment, you're bidding against lots of other buyers, right? And your offer shows that your source of funds has been approved and you've already got a conveyancer lined up, your chances of your offer being accepted are so much more than someone else offering the same amount who hasn't done that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's incumbent. I mean, the agents are being told by trading standards they have to do this, and they don't really want to do it. And they will just look at source of funds. They won't look at source of wealth, which is what we sadly we have to dig much deeper into your finances. But yes, it's hugely powerful, as you say. Two buyers after the same property. I know which one I'd pick. I'd pick the one that's all sorted and there's solicitors instructed and they've gone through all my source of wealth and source of funds.
So Carlos, I think we've just answered your question. You're looking to buy the next 12 to 18 months. So I mean, Simon says 8 weeks. I would say, if you're pretty sure that's within 90 days, no more than 90 days, that's a good time to start shopping around, looking for a good conveyancer.
I agree.
And choosing them very carefully as well. Don't just sign up with the first one. If you don't end up using Thomas Legal, which you'd be bonkers not to, or Sweeney Miller up in Sunderland, but if you must choose a conveyancer that you're happy with. But don't do it in a hurry, and do make sure you get a good one, because the number of people I get saying, I've got a conveyancer, and they're rubbish. They're not responding. I don't know what to do.
Yeah. And I'd ask really quite pertinent questions. How much work have you done in this sector? For example, leasehold. Is the person that's going to be acting for me, are they qualified, or are you going to be acting, as some junior going to be doing it? That's really important as well. Have you won any awards for what you've done? Do you So I think there's a few things you can ask there.
It's an interesting question, timely one. Ahmed Ali says, I'm buying a house and in the conveyancing process, no chain, but considering delaying the sale until the autumn budget in case stamp duty is removed. Can I ask my solicitor to slow down the sale? Yeah,
I thought someone might ask about the Miss Reeves and her comments about, alleged comments about changing stamp duty, and we don't clearly know what's going to happen. Yes, of course you do. It's your sale. You can decide what you want to do. Who knows what's going to happen in the autumn budget? You might be ahead of the game. You might lose out, and that's the problem, And I think what we do know is that this may well slow the market even more for the next couple of months, because people are going to hedge their bets and wait until we have the announcement to see what's going to happen.
Yeah, it is. It staggers me how government after government fails to learn their lesson about what happens when they just tease stuff and the impact it has on the housing market.
Yeah.
the very real life impact it has on people's moves when they're just like, oh yeah, in a report someone might say that maybe this might happen, and then it's understandable why people do this, and it's just, I wish they'd stop meddling. I really do.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd say to recommend is that you are running the risk of slowing down your deal to the detriment of your buyer potentially, because your buyer may go, whoa, hold on a minute,
He's the buyer.
Sorry, he's the buyer. Sorry, he is the buyer. I apologize. Well, okay, maybe your seller will say, hold on a minute, I think I've been messed about here.
Yeah.
I want to put it back on the market. That could happen. And I think the other thing, what we seem to be hearing is that if things are changed, it's going to be right. I don't know what sort of price you're buying at, but it's going to be the upper end of the market as per usual. That's going to bear the brunt of these changes, we think, if it does happen.
Right. Stephen Simmons says, what's your view on freeholds with the catch of open spaces being run by a management company? Will this be killed off in the future? Caused us a nightmare in delaying our purchase.
Yeah, so I think what this is let's say you buy a property on a big estate or a small estate, so it's a newish house. What you sometimes have is you have communal areas. So there might be a playground, there might be visitor parking, there might be some verges, I don't know, a lake, whatever. So what the developer will do, the builder, they won't want to hold on to those areas. So what they do is they transfer those areas into a company, and all of you collectively live on the estate are shareholders in that company, and therefore you have to contribute via an estate called an estate charge, again a service charge, doesn't matter what you call it, to the upkeep of those areas. So I think it's right and proper. There's no other way you can really do it. So I don't think you can kill that off. You're going to always, in these sort of open space areas where you have got communal stuff, if the council aren't going to take it over, that's the only way you can structure that, as far as I'm concerned. I think what he is saying, it causes a nightmare when delaying their purchase, is if you're buying a new build or a modern property and the estate isn't finished, that transfer of that area of land may not have happened, and it's very difficult to get any meaningful information about what is going to happen, and that can cause delays. So I understand that, but I don't think it's going to fundamentally change.
Stephen Simmons, same guy, also mentions that the buyer of his house used Sweeney Miller, who are the firm that you guys recommended to me when I said I wanted to add a second firm.
That's great to hear.
Seamless, yeah, good to know. Melisha Martin Lacey says, why does it take 12 weeks or more to exchange? Should it not be quicker and easier in today's world?
Yes, it should be. Do you know that one of the fundamental problems we have is you get the problem with lawyers, they've got too much work, they get delays. You've got the problem with mortgage lenders, it takes too long to go through referencing, get a valuation done, get a mortgage offer out. It takes too long to get these searches back, and the main one that takes an age is the one that's done at the local authority where you're buying, the council. And sometimes that can take 4 weeks. Sometimes that can take 6 weeks. Sometimes it can take a week, depending on which local authority are involved. Hackney Council were hacked, funnily enough, many years ago, and they still don't have their systems up and running properly. So, this all contributes to these delays. And then the last thing that holds people up is clients themselves not getting their paperwork organised, delaying, not listening to what their solicitors are telling them, making decisions about when they're going to move without ever speaking to anyone else. So I'm sorry, but clients can also lead to that delay as well. But yes, it takes too long. We're all in agreement.
I know. It is amazing. You see in the newspapers all this criticism about the moving industry and about how estate agents are bad and conveyancers are bad. And no one ever says in the papers, and actually movers are the worst. And I know I have a whole audience of movers here. But the truth is that some movers are so underprepared and just sort of, I don't know, it's weird. It's like, do you actually want to move house? You've gone quiet, you're not answering anything.
And I think one for the conveyancers is don't hassle your solicitor every day thinking that's going to achieve anything. They will tell you when stuff happens. You might get an automatic update, which probably isn't great, but they should be telling you and should be sending you reports and letting you know what the progress is. I get that you want to know. I get that you're stressed by the whole thing. But if you decide to ring them every day or email them every day, all you're doing is stopping them actually getting on with their work. And, you have to think about a balance for that. So I would think once a week is perfectly adequate for an update if you haven't had an update, but I wouldn't keep chasing them. It doesn't solve anything. It just means that everyone gets more stressed.
It's very interesting, actually, because the work I'm doing with Carringtons at the moment, I'm just involved in looking in detail at exactly how they do their sales progression process. So the handling of the transactions that have been agreed, liaising between the conveyancers and the buyers and the sellers and the surveyors, and all that kind of stuff. And because their deal pipeline has swelled so much since they've been working with me, to the point where she's now basically like, I've always just, it's one of the situations where you've got a very experienced person who knows the situations inside out, got that sixth sense, that instinct, and can see problems coming and can head them off before they get too serious. But she said, I've never had this many to deal with at the same time, and I'm struggling now to maintain my level of knowledge of exactly what's happening with every single deal. Because, and my challenge with them now is we want to sort of increase their capacity to handle deals without affecting the quality of the deals. And they've got, at the moment, their success rate in terms of deal agreed to completed is over 90%, 93% at the moment.
Yeah.
Which is outstanding. It's
very high.
As good as it gets. And they want to really protect that result, because it makes it an unbeatable result when they're going out to talk to sellers saying, look how effective our process is. This is how quick we get everything sold. And this is the success rate and how few fall through.
Yeah.
And this is someone who is not an avid user of systems and tech and that kind of stuff. It's telephone, it's diary, it's knowing the clients, everything else. It's a really interesting conundrum, actually, how you scale that. Because she talking about chasing solicitors. She was saying about how it's you can chase too often and it just annoys everyone. If you're going to chase, it's got to be for a real reason.
Yeah, and I think, let's be honest, if the deals go through very quickly and the solicitors are doing what they should be doing and updating everyone, you don't need a sales progressor.
Well, that's also true. Yeah, that is.
You have a sales progressor because the whole system is broken. So you're trying to help people through this broken system. But if the system wasn't broken and deals would happen within 2 weeks, you wouldn't need sales progression because the solicitors would just get on with it and do it.
Well, and that is actually happening at the moment. But the problem arises when there are wobbles in the chain.
Yes.
And when you've got to handle a situation where it's not a legal situation, it's a funding situation, or the sale didn't go through, or that other property that was going to release funds for this one, and it's that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's a nice problem to have. Though it's a really good problem to have, because my target is to keep their success rate at well above 90%. Drabsy89 again says, how has the Building Safety Act caused delays on flat transactions? What's the added delay?
Yeah, I thought we might get something on Building Safety Act. BSA, Building Safety Act came in because of the terrible events at Grenfell. And this was basically trying to make landlords, freeholders responsible for removing cladding and making their buildings safe, and not being able to charge extortionate amounts to the leasehold, the flat owners. So this legislation was enacted. I mean, we could do hours on the Building Safety Act. It is such a complicated piece of legislation. Why does it cause delays? Well, it's added another layer of bureaucracy. The leasehold has to serve a notice on the landlord. The landlord has to serve a notice with a certificate. There are various people that are exempt from the remediation, from sort of cleaning up the buildings. It only applies before a particular date, 2022. You have to benefit from it. It has to be your main residence. You can't own more than 3 properties in the UK. If it's owned by a management company, in those, do you collectively own the freehold? It doesn't apply. It goes on, and a lot of lawyers, sadly, may start acting for you, and then suddenly realize, oh my God, the BSA is involved in this. I don't know what I'm doing. So the delay is the extra bureaucracy, the extra process involved with anything that's affected by Building Safety Act. And it is generally something which is over 11 meters or 5 stories. That's generally where you are. And then there's extra rules for bigger, higher buildings. We took the view very early on when this came out that we needed to be experts in BSA, because a lot of lawyers had said, we don't want to do this, or our insurers will not allow us to do it. I think that was a bit of a cop out. I think they could have done it, but they just didn't want to do it. And that is still the situation now. So it comes back to what you were saying about earlier. If you are buying a property which has got Building Safety Act issues, and you can still buy it, it's not a problem. Make sure you get a lawyer that really knows their stuff on BSA. Otherwise, you will buy the wrong property. It'll cause you massive problems. You won't be able to sell it. You won't be able to mortgage it in the future. So you've got to be very, very careful with modern flats, which are over 5 stories in height. I think that's all I would say in general terms. Be very careful. Make sure you go into it with your eyes open.
Cool. Okay. Now, another question from WF451, who says some agents force you to pay up front for money laundering checks. What is reasonable to pay for this pointless check, which all the big time money laundering criminals simply sail through anyway?
I like that. That's a great question. Well, I think we're all in it. You know, money laundering is a major problem in this country, and it is incumbent on all of us as professionals to protect each other and make sure that criminal money is not washing through the system. So I don't think it's unreasonable for a
Simon, you say it's a major problem for us in this country. Joe Public on the street doesn't see or understand why it's a major problem. In what way is it a major problem? How does that problem manifest itself?
Well, it's a problem in that there is so much criminal money washing around that the best way of washing that money and making sure it's clean is to go and buy something with it. Because as soon as if you can get your dirty money into my solicitor's account, it then becomes clean.
Yeah. Okay.
The National Crime Agency may still come after you later on, but that money is then clean. So then they can buy a property, sit on it for a couple of years, excuse me, and then sell it. No problem. So that's why it is incumbent on all of us to make sure that we do money laundering checks. I think that the annoying thing is you may well do a money laundering check with your estate agent. You then might do one with a lawyer as well. You might do one with your mortgage advisor. One of the money laundering checks we do with a company called Third Fort, there's a lot of sharing of that information between the parties, and I think that's a really good thing. I don't know why. I think I'd question why. I'd say to the agent, why do you need a money laundering check? Here's my identification. And as long as you provide that identification, which is certified by a lawyer, or you walk in with your original documents, there's no point. They don't need to do an electronic check. Your solicitors may well need to do an electronic check because they need to check against things like make sure that there may be any criminal convictions against you, possible bankruptcy. If you're something called a PEP, which is a politically exposed person, which means they have to be really, really careful when they're acting for you. We act for some very well-known people across all sorts of different sectors. And we have to be really careful sometimes because we need to make sure that there's not influence. They're not being influenced by a third party, for example, in what they're doing. So I think agents sometimes just do it because they know they think they have to do it, but I'm not sure sometimes what benefit there is to you. But money laundering is a big problem. We do lots and lots of training all the time on money laundering. We've had instances of it in the firm, as most conveyancing lawyers would have done. I think I had one last week. So,
where you realise at the outset that it was a dirty money, or
yeah,
asked you?
No. Well, not as far as I'm aware. Maybe they have. I don't know. You don't know, do you? This one involved crypto. And it wasn't right in the first place, and we can deal with crypto because crypto is going to be a thing of the future. There are some people that use deposits, use crypto for buying property, or they have to convert it back into pounds, but the source is crypto. And this one just didn't feel right. And after a few other checks, it was clear that it was all a bit of a scam. And then in that situation, we say, I'm sorry, we can't act for you because you haven't complied. And in the background, what we may well do, without telling you, is we might do a report to the National Crime Agency as well for them to check you out.
Question here from Channel C. I instructed a conveyancer last week, and it took 1 week for them to open the file. Is this normal?
Well, it shouldn't be. Sadly, we're at a time when everyone's on holiday. And, with the best will in the world, if they're inundated with instructions and they're short of staff or someone's ill, it shouldn't take a week, Chelsea. But it does happen, I'm afraid, from time to time. It should be virtually instantaneous, but it comes back to my point about tech. Most conveyancing lawyers don't use much tech, and they'll be, looking at, they'll be filling out blank letters and, trying to populate it with your information and then getting it in the post or maybe on an email if you're lucky. So yeah, it should not take that long.
Got a question here from a customer of yours. Patricia says, when making an offer, I'd like to ask my solicitor, your firm actually, to confirm the source of funds. Do you charge for said letter of confirmation? Had a problem last time when my bank statement was shown to the seller. In other words, the agent, I think, showed the buyer's bank statement to the seller, showing my savings that was above my offer. In other words, Patricia doesn't want to be giving bank statements to agents that agents then show to sellers. Would you send an email to an estate agent or letter by post? In other words, as acting for her, would you be able to confirm?
So once we've gone through, if you've paid us for doing that source of funds check and onboarding you, and we're happy with that, there's nothing to stop us. We wouldn't charge you extra to say to the estate agent, we can confirm that we've gone through source of funds and the client has sufficient funds to purchase the property or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Right. I have one more question for you in relation to the last one, and it's just that slipped my mind. I should have written it down. I think it's getting to that time of wrapping up. It's been going for an hour again, Simon.
Have we? Wow.
Yes.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Time flies when you're having fun. I know what the question was.
Okay.
This is a question that I get asked, and I don't know how to answer it as well as I think you will, which is, okay, look, I'm a first-time buyer or I'm a first-time seller, and I'm going out to choose a conveyancer, and I want to make an informed, careful choice. I want to get one that's good service and good value, but I just have no way of knowing. I have no way of telling one from another, good from bad. How do I actually go about choosing a conveyancer? Because it's not just about the quote, is it?
No. It's definitely not about the quote. And if it's about the quote, then you're not choosing in the right way. It is, for me, it might be a recommendation from someone that's used that firm before. It might be, for me, if I was ringing three particular different solicitors, I'd be looking at that interaction, that initial interaction. And do I feel that this person is going to look after my interests sufficiently? Are they professional? Do they have enough knowledge? Do they have that technical knowledge that I really need to make sure that this property is sufficient for my needs? It's your biggest transaction, it's your biggest investment. You've got to make sure you get it right. So for me, it's about the initial interaction and checking that firm and making sure, as we said earlier, are they specialists? Do they know what they're doing? Have a look at their website. They won lots of awards for what they've done, all that sort of great stuff. Has it got pictures of the people I'm, going to be acting for me? So yeah, it's difficult though. And I think the other major challenge is that when you get three quotes, they'll all be different because we all quote in different ways. And I think that's ridiculous as well. Yeah. Just to complicate matters for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, so Simon, thank you so much again for your time and your expertise and taking it blind as well. Because Simon has no idea what questions are coming. No. These are live questions, and you guys are shooting from the hip, and he's firing back.
And I'm sorry about the pinging. It won't happen next time. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to chuck it out the window in a minute. It's never, ever happened to me. I don't know what's going on.
But if you are, or if you have been trying and failing to find a conveyancer you really think is the right thing, the right one, the one you can trust, etc., and you'd like to talk to Simon's team, then pop your details in at that URL on the screen, mhwc.co.uk/conveyancing. If you're in the north of England, you'll be able to talk to Sweeney Miller, who are Thomas Hill's counterpart up the north. And that first conversation is a no obligation chat, isn't it, Simon?
Absolutely, of course it is. Yes, of course it is. Yeah, we'd love to speak to you.
And have a chat and find out why it's a multi-award winning firm that I'm very, very happy to be working with for the last 3 years. Thanks, guys. And yes, if you want to get your Fix Housing, Fix Everything merch, shop.mhwc.co.uk. On that happy note and that shameless plug, guys, thanks very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.